Why is it that when you ask a Filipino, sometimes they go around the bush rather than telling you straight up what's on their mind? This Pinoy love language is called Ligoy, to tiptoe around a topic. In the islands, one would say, ano ba talaga ang pakay mo? Bakit ligoy-ligoy ka pa? Why are you really here? Why do you keep walking around the bush? In today's episode, let's talk about the reasons why a Filipino would use ligoy. Are Filipinos truly bilingual? We use the same language at home but speak in love languages foreign to each other, together but separated. Kamusta? I'm Roanne, licensed psychotherapist mom, immigrant twice, first generation Pinoy raising my mixed Filipino-American children in America. I found that after visiting 500 Filipino homes, I continue to be a student of the culture. In this podcast, we would be seatmates in this beautiful cultural classroom. And by the way, did I tell you I need my kapeng barako straight from Batangas before each class? If you're interested in learning the deep intricacies of the Filipino culture, especially as it merged with American culture, talks about trauma-informed care and deepening your Filipino relationships across generations, which includes my fave topic, Pinoy love languages, you're in the right place. I'm so excited to share with you that the 7 Pinoy Love Language course has just been released. Discover 7 most used and very confusing sometimes Pinoy love languages. If you've scratched your head talking to your mom, your dad, or your wife, and you feel like you have to decipher what they're feeling, even after you've asked them a few times, you'll really enjoy this course. It's one of a kind and it's made for you to get and give the Pinoy love you deserve. Check the link in the show notes. Kamusta everyone? This is Roanne, your host. Welcome to another episode in the Pinoy Love Language podcast. Let's go straight to the point. Let's talk about social identity first. Your social identity, that's meaning who you think as being part of a group or the group thinking of you as their member, is your social identity. Before talking about ligoy, let me further clarify why Filipinos speak in this unique way. I'm sure I've mentioned this in the other previous episodes. History, when there is more threat, either ecological threat or socio-political threat, whether current or in the past, there's a tendency to huddle together. When you think about animals in the forest, maybe if there's a hail, it's raining hard, they'll need to huddle together for their survival. It's very similar for us humans. From a evolutionary psychology perspective, for us to survive, we want to get closer together. The power of the group is simply more needed than a single solo person. Now, when you're huddled together, there's this core value in the motherland called pakiramdam, which is simply sensing more the other beyond words. When you're together, if there's an enemy, for instance, and you're hiding in the bush, you would have to use codes rather than just words. Of course, words are important. If you imagine just using codes with your hands or like gestures, those could mean safety. Using nonverbal cues, using codes such as Pinoy love languages, of course, they're not all nonverbal, but it's a very high context culture rather than just being very direct and linear in their communication. A Filipino might state but also use a lot of other ways to communicate, nonverbal gestures to make their point. Very opposite in the American culture where you basically need to be linear. Say what you want, say what you need, ask for what you want. Ligoy again is to go around the bush. Talk around the topic. What are the possible reasons why a Filipino may do this? First of all, to save face. It's not very uncommon. Let's say someone is needing to borrow money. Maybe the dad said, okay, go to your auntie who is well off and borrow money from her. Now, the dad may say, tell your auntie, this is what happened. And then usually what you would hear is, alam niya na yon, which means she already knows it. One way to go around the bush is you allow the other person to capture really what would usually be embarrassing for you to ask. It might be, in this example, embarrassing for you to be in a position where you have to ask a relative for money. Then you tell them little pockets of story that hoping eventually they'd say, oh, okay, can I lend you money? Ligoy has that purpose, right? It's most effective if the person knows you and knows your story. And so you're basically dropping them a clue. Another reason is when you are talking, walking around the bush, it almost seemed like what you want to convey, or if you're asking in the same example, that if the other person was able to capture that it was offered to you, it seemed like it's offered to you rather than you ask for it. It's similar that it would give you a sense of saving face, but also it's possible that it would soften what we call the debt of gratitude, like for you to ask directly. And if it's just given to you, even without you really directly asking for it, it would feel like you would be grateful, but you would not be burdened by that debt to reciprocate. That's a possible explanation for ligoy. Third is because Filipinos are oriented to be polite in our language. We use po and opo ho and oho just to convey that we respect the person we're speaking to. It could be because of their age, but it could be because of their position. And being polite, right? You're just going around the bush. An example for this is if you're wooing a girl, you're courting a girl, and rather than being straight up, ask, could you be my girlfriend? Which for sure you can ask. But if you are paligoy-ligoy, you're basically dropping clues, and you might say, oh, you know what? You're so beautiful, or I really like you. When that happens and the person does not accept what you're offering, for instance, or what you're asking, the rejection doesn't seem so bad. You're kind of like keep checking if the other person is feeling the same way, especially during courtship, because there is a distinction with female and male. Sometimes the orientation of the Filipino woman is to observe first, not to say yes, the way to give the male who is courting her a hard time. That's one possible reason why someone would use ligoy. When we return, I'm going to share how to use the ruler method, which is a culturally relevant approach when someone is actually activating a Pinoy love language. Stick around, diyan ka lang! I want to know what topics interest you about Filipino relationship, immigration, mental health, at iba pa. Send me a message at info@calamansijuice.com with the subject title podcast topic. And as always, the email will be in the show notes. I'll see you there. Again, this episode is brought to you by the 7 Pinoy Love Language. To get and give the Pinoy love that you deserve, there you will be able to practice the ruler method. Each Pinoy love language has a case example. And did I tell you there's actually a couple of bonuses? The first bonus is the ebook on 5 more Pinoy love languages. Each also has its own case example. And I am worthy of love audio meditation. All the information is in the show notes. So back to our show. Salamat po for sticking around. Let's do another case example. Let's say an ate wants to borrow your bag, but instead of borrowing, she kept on complimenting it. What would you do? Of course, it's always better to just verbalize that straight up, but just for the purpose of this example, someone activating the Pinoy love language, and we're going to use the ruler method. The R in ruler is to recognize. You'll tell ate, who keeps complimenting your bag, but she doesn't want to ask if she could actually borrow it. You would say, do you want to borrow it? And then usually she might say, because the orientation of being polite, no, no, it's okay. When you recognize, you really read it. No, no, it's okay. You can borrow it. This is hard because it's almost like you're not taking her word for it. And that's usually an orientation in the islands. There's a lot of rehearsal, repeating. We might even say, ang kulit naman, when someone keeps repeating. But parents do that a lot to their children. They'll say, oh, when I get older, would you do this? And then the child would respond in a certain way, back and forth, back and forth. And you might think you don't do this, but in some Filipino household, even in America, they'd say, who do you like better? The cooking of Papa's sinigang or Mommy's sinigang? And they kind of like do things similar over and over again. So again, R is to recognize, right? You're seeing what you're seeing. U is to uphold. So U is for upholding. So you know that ate is feeling embarrassed, so she doesn't want to ask you straight. Rather, she just kept complimenting, kind of like walking around the bush. So you're just upholding it. It's okay. You don't have to be shy. It looks really good on you, ate. So that's a sample of you. L is lend a hand. So L is to lend a hand. If you want something next time, I'm here for you, and you could just ask me, and just a reassurance. E in ruler is to entertain. I think this is the most important part in the ruler method. Now, Ligoy is not as problematic compared sometimes to other beautiful Pinoy love languages, but E allows us to entertain a healthier way of communicating. The R, U, and L is more meant to stroke the other person. Now, if you're irritated, oh my gosh, I need to stroke them, but they're also an adult. I agree with you, but over being right, I'm hoping that you choose to be more effective. This is the way that we would change the trajectory in the way we communicate in our Filipino home. I thank you for being patient and for choosing to be effective. When you get to E, then that's when you can negotiate. You can tell ate, ate, next time, it's hard for me to figure out, if you're really just want the bag, want to borrow the bag, or you just find it beautiful or attractive, right? So just tell me. It's really cool. I prefer you tell me, and I could just tell you if that's something that you cannot borrow. R is to reconnect. So just reconnecting with ate, especially if she felt a little embarrassed. Talking about or changing the topic would be a way to reconnect right at that moment. I hope that was helpful. To just recap, Ligoy is walking around the bush. It serves as a way to save face, allows to soften the depth towards the other person. A Filipino always is usually honed to be grateful, but at least it's not a burden. Third, it's somebody wanting to continue this core value of being polite. So again, don't forget, if you have any questions, suggestions for this Pinay therapist, go leave me an email. I thank you so much for your time, at sa uulitin.